Hey friends, welcome to Garden Adventures. I'm Mary, and today we're going to be talking about winter sowing. And I wanted to go through a question and answer session because I've seen a lot of questions floating around where people just have specific questions about winter sowing. So let's jump right into it. First of all, what is winter sowing? In a nutshell, it is a specific seed starting method outdoors in an enclosed container during the winter months, and seeds will germinate in spring. So it's not really a jump start on seed starting. It's more of a low touch method of seed starting, a more natural way. It produces very hardy seedlings. So you might ask, what are the advantages of winter sowing, or why should I winter sow? There are definitely a lot of benefits. First of all, it's a lot of fun. Secondly, it's very easy to do. Thirdly, there is no special equipment needed. You don't need grow lights or heat mats. And it produces very hardy seedlings. And so there's no hardening off process. The seeds grow up outdoors, and so they're very tough little seedlings. So those are some of the major benefits of it, and it doesn't take up any space indoors, is another. And again, did I say fun? It's a lot of fun. So it's my favorite reason for winter sowing. Next up, can I winter sow X seed? So fill in the blank. Yes, as long as the seed is not a tropical, you can sow that seed winter sowing method. I have tried many types of seeds. I've not tried trees or shrubs, but you can sow seeds for trees, shrubs, perennials, tender annuals, and hardy annuals. I have tried perennials and all of the annuals. I've tried many annuals, and I will continue to do so because I think it's a great method. And I'm actually going to do some comparison this year. Things that I'm starting indoors, I will also be starting in the winter sowing method. And especially the cool season hardy annuals, I think do extremely well and germinate rather early for me. So I'm excited to try, the side-by-side comparison. And not just when they germinate, because I'm sure the ones indoors are going to germinate sooner. It's really like the hardiness of it. Do I get a more robust plant from starting it in winter sowing, even if it's a little bit later? So we'll do that comparison, because I have a lot more outdoor space to start seeds than I do indoors. And so that is, if I can start more seeds outdoors, even better. What type of soil should I use for winter sowing? You want to use a good quality potting mix or potting soil. Starting seed mixes or seed starting mixes are not recommended for winter sowing. Those are really designed for indoor seed starting. They're a little too lofty. There's not enough to them. You really want to stick with a good quality potting mix or potting soil. Dollar store type potting soils are not recommended. They just have produced spotty germination, and the reports have not been great on using those lower quality potting soils or potting mixes. And you definitely don't want to use a garden soil. Anything for in-ground planting you don't want to use, and you definitely don't want to dig up garden soil from your garden. You want to use something that facilitates good drainage. So good quality potting mix or potting soil. You also want to avoid anything that says weed-free on the package, because those potting mixes have been treated with a chemical to prevent the germination of weed seeds. That means that chemical will also prevent the germination of your seeds that you desire to start. So try to avoid anything that says weed-free. All right, next up, this is a very popular question. How many seeds should I sow per container? And that answer really is up to you and how many seedlings you would like to see in a container. I often will do 2 seeds per spot that I'm planting, but in a gallon milk jug like this, I often do 5 spots if they are bigger seeds. If they're smaller seeds, I just sprinkle on top. I did that with the poppies. Just sprinkle liberally, and I will break them apart and plant clumps, which is also known as the hunk of seed method. You can make your choice just based on how many seedlings you'd like to see in your container. All right, next up, milk jugs. Milk jugs is a really popular container to use for seed starting, for winter sowing. One, they're a good size, they hold the correct amount of soil. You can purchase milk in translucent or transparent milk jugs, but you often get opaque milk jugs, which are not great for winter. They're not at all recommended for winter sowing. What you can do if you only have opaque milk jugs is to cut windows in them. So you still want to cut your hinge. You want to add drainage at the bottom, make sure it's properly drained, but you need to let light in. So you can cut windows and cover them with some sort of plastic. This is a plastic cover for bowls. Those you can buy at the Dollar Tree. I'll pop up a picture of the box that I purchased these in. You want to make sure you poke this hole at the top so that we're letting in moisture, and it acts as a ventilation so the heat can escape. Any moisture, excess moisture can escape. And you can, when I tape this down, this plastic will be taped right to the milk jug. That's all you need to do with that. Works quite well. But that method works well for a lot of people. I don't happen to get a lot of opaque milk jugs. I am definitely going to try this one. For sure, in this method, I'm going to plant up some seeds and see what happens, and I will plant up this one as well. I was keeping plant food in here, so I washed it out, but I'm going to use that one also, and we'll see what happens. Other containers that you can use. I just had a specific question about that one, so I wanted to address it. But other containers, you can use any container that allows 3 to 4 inches of soil and 2 to 3 inches of headroom for the seedlings once they germinate. And you want to be able to let light in. So if it's an opaque container around the bottom, you want to make sure that you have enough light coming in on the top. So you can use nursery containers, you can use plastic bins from the dollar store, you can go out and purchase specific bins just for winter sowing or poke holes in the bottom, ventilation on the top. That really is the key, is that you can allow drainage out the bottom and ventilation on the top. 4 inches of soil reservoir and at least 2 inches of headroom for seedlings. You can also use foil pans. A lot of people have used takeout containers, those foil takeout containers, and put some sort of a clear plastic dome over top of them. The foil baking pans with the plastic lid are excellent for winter sowing. Again, poke those drainage holes in the bottom and ventilation holes on top. And you know what, use what you have. If this is your first year winter sowing, I really highly recommend just trying it out. Follow the basic guidelines, put the soil in, make sure you have drainage holes, ventilation on top, press the seeds on the soil, put the top on, ventilation holes, and make sure you label. Labeling is very important. Okay, where should I place my containers? First of all, any light exposure in the winter is fine. There's enough light that seeds will germinate outdoors in their container. So if the only spot you have is a north-facing location, that's fine. The major consideration is that your containers are safe. So you don't want to place them somewhere that a pet can get to them, or pests can get into them, or that you're going to snow blow or shovel. So you want to just make sure they're in an area you know where it is. If that needs to be up on a picnic table or other surface, that's okay. You want them out in the open so they're exposed to rain and snow and they're getting natural moisture. You can water them, but really the point of winter sowing is to, be exposed to the elements. So you definitely don't want them up against a foundation. You don't want them up against the garage wall. You don't want them up against your house foundation. And make sure that they're not under an overhang. All right, I had this question when I started and I see it a lot. what is the schedule for winter sowing? And the short answer is there is no schedule. You start winter sowing on the winter solstice, and you can winter sow straight through to summer, essentially. If the temperatures in the evening are cool enough and you can use the container, then you can winter sow. There is a preference to start perennial seeds first. Anything that needs cold stratification, you want to plant as early as possible so they can go through multiple freeze-thaw cycles during the winter months. After the perennials, you would move to hardy annuals and then tender annuals. But you can put all your seeds out at one time if you prefer. I'm going to be doing winter sowing about every other week, so I'll do several containers every other week throughout the winter straight into spring, so that is also an option for people. So anytime after the winter solstice, you can begin winter sowing, and you can do them all at one time if you prefer. All right, when do I open my containers? Again, you don't have to open your containers until you're ready to plant them. If you prefer, if it starts to warm up during the daytime to over mid 50s to 60s, you're going to want to start checking on your containers. You can move them to a shadier location. You can start opening them at that point, but making sure that you can close them back up. I found that last year closing them up was a pain. I had almost 80 containers, so that was not ideal for me. So I think just moving them to a shadier location would benefit them, but that's up to you. If you want the extra work of opening and closing, that's up to you. If it does get to be around 60 degrees and you have decided not to open your containers and it is substantially warmer, you can poke additional ventilation holes in the top of your container. Okay, another question I've seen is, I have seedlings, but it's calling for frost. What do I need to do to protect them? And a lot of people have covered their containers if it's calling for frost and they have, seedlings that are just about ready to go in the ground. But remember that these are hardy little guys and they've grown up in this weather and they should be just fine in their container. Some of them might tinge. If it's the springtime and you're just getting a light frost or, just a regular frost, if it's gonna dip down into very chilly temperatures and it's still early in the season, you may lose those seedlings, but they may not have been the strongest seedlings anyway. So you may have more seeds in that container that will germinate. So, it is one of those things that does happen in the winter. Some things sprout early and then they die back, and another seed will germinate a little later in the season, and that's the one that's going to do better in the long run. I hope that all made sense. So, completely up to you if you choose to cover your containers. I like to let them just be. I like the hands-off approach as much as possible. And lastly, when do I water my containers? You do want to monitor moisture levels, making sure that your containers are draining but are staying moist. And during the winter months, if they're frozen, you don't need to worry about it. But if it starts to warm up, you can pick up the container. If it's light, you want to add a little water. If it's still pretty heavy, then you're all set. You don't need to add any water. If inside the container you can see condensation, that's a good indicator that they're moist. But sometimes they're moist enough, I pick them up and they're very heavy and there is no condensation. It just may not have warmed up enough for the condensation to form. So those are just, little indicators. Picking it up and, making sure that it's heavy enough is the way that I typically check. And you just want to, put a little water down the side and make sure the water is getting into the soil. You don't want to dislodge the seeds or these very small seedlings. Guys, I hope that was helpful. I appreciate all the questions that have come in, and I hope this was helpful. If you have other advice for folks, I garden in Zone 6B, so that is my experience. I have definitely had lots of snow and lots of rain. This year I have had less snow. Last year we had quite a lot of snow, so I didn't really worry about moisture levels at all. This year I've been checking more often because we've had rain and then it doesn't rain for several days, and then we have rain and it doesn't rain for several days. Anyway, so if you have experience with any of these questions that people have had, feel free to chime in the comment section, because I love learning from all of you. And I really do appreciate everyone watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks so much.